right? Before we became humans with houses and money and everything to exchange with other humans, we all had our sexuality to exchange.
Welcome to Real Relationships, a real and honest podcast about the inside world of working with close relationships. I'm Alona Serpentine, a couples therapist, a sex therapist, and a relationship educator. Here, I draw the curtain on how close relationships work, interview other relationship professionals, share behind-the-scenes stories from my own practice, and also invite couples, families, and individuals of all kinds to speak about their journey and their real relationships. We as humans cannot live without others. This is why I hope that by sharing the stories and reality-tested information from real professionals and real clients, more people will enjoy fulfilling, supporting, and successful relationships. If you want to have one of those, or make your existing ones even better, and I can't imagine you are not, tune into our episodes released twice a month on Thursdays. And to stay up to date with what we have to share, subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform or join our Facebook group, Real Relationships. Stay tuned and stay real.
Another mystery I want you to resolve for me is when I came to Australia, quite a few men suddenly opened up. First of all, what is it about that talking to a woman from different background? They wouldn't talk like that to person from their circle. They wouldn't talk like that to, let's say, Anglo-Saxon girl, but they're very comfortable. The moment they hear I'm from Eastern Europe, I'm Russian, it seems to be the guard is off, and they very freely, the conversation flows very freely. The men are very comfortable to say quite intimate things about themselves. This is first question, then comes another one.
I guess when you're asking me this question, two thoughts come to my mind. First of all, we all have a certain vibe that we give off. Mm-hmm. And I think people like us or women like us, we are naturally more used to talking to men. So we don't put our guard up when a man comes into the room because we're used to talking to them. So they already sense that we are not kind of putting our shoulders higher and our chin higher and kind of like putting that, armor on us, that, there is a man here. They sense that. They sense that we are more relaxed. Our defense systems are down. So a lot of that is actually happening without us realizing that. It's just simply because we don't sense certain signal to them. And humans are really good at detecting danger signals. So that's one thought that I'm having, that they just sense this is a person who is available. So they are not putting their guard up when I approach them. And the second thought, especially if they hear that there is a bit of accent, especially if they hear that maybe Eastern European accent, I think an element of curiosity plus an element of a little bit of a hero-ness, a little bit like, this is a person who is new to here. They may need a little bit more help. They may need to have some protection. So I think that can kick in as well, because it balances the power dynamic. We're no longer from the same country where, we are all on the same ground to start with. Suddenly you're a person who may be less knowledgeable. So you may need some help from me. And men generally do want to help.
Yes, they do.
So that's kind of the rescuer, the superhero comes out a little bit. Plus, obviously, you are a female. If it's
then the other questions, and what with the oversharing of their personal experiences and pretty very comfortable way of talking about their sexual experiences with their wives. What is this? What's the secret?
I don't know really, because I think it's all very individual. I have to think back about my own experiences in this. And I would say that generally men do want to talk.
Yes.
Generally men do want to talk. And if we think about men that they never share anything, they keep it all to themselves, then I think very often it's because we don't give them an opportunity to do so. So in my counseling experience, and I'm talking primarily from my counseling experience, when they do come to my space and they know that that's the space to talk, they're more than happy to talk. I often hear it from their female partners, like, oh my gosh, he just said more in this room than over the whole year to me. Simply because I provide that space, and this is my job to do that.
You are telling me you got 1 month and 2 years.
Well, absolutely. We need to listen, but also we need to show the person that we want to listen. We are interested in that. And often that's all what it takes. Typically, however, when you say people share with you their intimate sexual details, that's not quite what I would like to hear, because they still need to understand that this requires consent. Sharing sexual information with someone without them explicitly inviting you to is non-consensual. That's crossing quite a few boundaries.
I felt this way initially. Then what I have done, obviously, I went and talked to psychologists because I said, look, I'm new in the country. I don't know what's going on. And his words were, what are you putting out there for them? Which was a question which absolutely shocked me because I was acting normal as I thought. I had to adjust. I had to put those boundaries. And that's when I understand. Just when you say no here, it's not exactly no because you're still staying friendly. You have to really jazz it up a bit, your boundaries. And that's what first lesson I have learned here when I came and I was way too relaxed, thinking, engaging in conversation when people are friendly. My friendliness was mistaken for something else. It's led me to uncomfortable situation with couple, but I adjusted very quickly. The second question, I promised you, I had 2 questions on these things, which culturally a little bit shocked me. When they were sharing, when I had my boundaries low, very prominent theme came up, is their wife withholds sex from them. What is this phenomenon? I thought, they do what? And they obviously were just quite upset by that. It just upset them that they're not getting something in life. Some of them said we didn't have it for 3 months. I don't know what they were trying to say to me, but the fact that it exists and then it was confirmed through my friendship groups and everything, it's quite common practice. Is it true?
It's a complex topic, but I will probably talk about it in more conceptual things.
Yes.
First of all, it's not specific to where we live. It's not just in Australia where that happens. Even about the first question that you asked with the boundaries, and also with this second part of the question where people use sex to manipulate or to balance the power scale, it all comes back to the fact that people in communities are often separated by sex, especially here, which means the role that men play in the society is one of the provider. And often women are perceived as those who look after the family, look after the children, and often they feel disadvantaged in this position because they don't earn an income or maybe earn less because they have to sacrifice towards the family and the children. And often, if they feel that the power dynamic is disbalanced, like let's say the man holds more cards than the woman, what does a woman do? She uses then, or she relies on sex and her sexuality to balance that power dynamic. So that's why we have the withholding. Typically, when there is sex withholding within a relationship, that suggests a disbalanced power dynamic. It means that the man is probably being either too dominant in the relationship or is using, let's say, money, financial resources, or maybe even emotional resources to control the woman. Mm-hmm. And that is something that happens not only in Australia, that happens universally.
Mm-hmm. Except universally, you can't get away with it being a woman. The man will go and have takeaway. That's what we say. Here it's more common from pocket of population which came across my way. I'm really careful about generalizing. Another concept really interesting you touched in our private conversation was weaponized sexuality. Can you talk about that one? That was interesting.
I mean, again, it's, I think I should share that something that I mentioned earlier about sexuality being our original source of life energy. But it's not only that, it's also our most natural resource, right? Before we became humans with houses and money and everything to exchange with other humans, we all had our sexuality to exchange. So it's the most kind of natural exchange medium that we have. And obviously, at times, we can use that sexuality as a tool, or you can say a weapon, especially if it's a little bit hostile, to control or to change things. So withholding sex can be regarded as weaponizing sex because we're using it as a not so friendly tool to control our relationship.
To serve our agenda.
To serve our agenda, for example, but the same way how money is very commonly used exactly in the same way, or like even children in separated couples are used in the same way. We as humans use whatever resources we can to control our environment. And sex is a very powerful resource. And that's why, of course.
So when this happening within couple, within the relationship, what usually the outcome of that? Do you see long-term, short-term gain? What is the long-term?
It's a loss-loss situation. Nobody wins. As soon as we start seeing our partner as an enemy that has to be controlled, the whole relationship loses. It's never a good idea to have a war of resources, money versus sex, children versus, employment. It never works because it only pushes the two partners further away. Inevitably, everybody loses, including the children.
Yes, that's what I see quite a lot. And another very interesting question, because I'm an accountant and naturally I have to gravitate towards a different type of resource called money. It's a conventional units of measurement is money, but in reality it's a resource. What's common between sex and money also? You have quite interesting philosophy about it.
Which is kind of what I've already spoken about. It's money and sex is a resource that we can exchange.
You also said interesting part before about communication. Sex you also see as a way of communicating. It's your conversation. It's with your partner. It can be taking place as verbally what we're saying, but it also can take part in a different level. And when we were talking about money with you, you also mentioned that money, it's also a conversation.
But I guess what is a conversation? The same way how like money and sex, it's an exchange. It's, I say something, you receive it, like, there is a read receipt on it, and then you reply. And the same thing happens with money and sex. I give you money, you receive it, and then you may give me something back, or you may even give me thank you for that as appreciation. Funnily enough, we do the same things in sex. There is even a metaphor of a sexual gift. It's like the same thing how you want to make someone feel better. You give them maybe a gift voucher or $100 for a birthday, and all you do, you just receive a thank you for that. And we do the same thing with sex too. Very often we engage in sex when we don't necessarily feel aroused or feel the desire, but we do that to make somebody else feel better because we want to receive that gratitude back. So they all have very similar processes to them. It's all an exchange. And we have a problem when that exchange is interrupted, when the feedback loop is missing, the same way like it is in conversation. If I say something to you and you don't understand what I'm talking about, whatever you're going to give me back is not going to work. And the same thing with money and sex.
So you as a sexologist will, I would assume trivially again, would help people to give this feedback in a such a way that the other person would understand them. Because what I think is happening, the conflict happening when the miscommunication.
Always.
And
Always.
it's in bed as well. It's miscommunication. There is unmet expectations, but expectations haven't been spoken about.
Correct.
How can I meet something if I don't know what it looks like? And other reasons why people have misfunctions there.
100%. So I often say
dysfunction, we call it.
Or we call it a nicer term, variation in sexual functioning, because it's all kind of on a spectrum. My job as a sex therapist or any kind of therapist is, first of all, to interpret. I help people understand each other. Mm-hmm. Using my skills, my knowledge, I help them understand each other. And if, let's say, if we use the metaphor of language, they have some, I don't know, grammar mistakes or punctuation mistakes in their languages, I help them correct them too. I may also add to their vocabulary. Very often, I actually increase their sexual menu. And I say, guys, what's on your sexual menu? What's in your vocabulary? And very often it's not actually quite diverse. So I say, guys, why are you always having a steak? Well, you don't like pasta, you don't like salad. We need to have a balanced diet in your sexual life. So how about we introduce a couple more things to make it a little bit more interesting and maybe more suitable to a different day and time of the day, how you feel.
And what's the reaction to that?
They love it. They love it because they don't think about it like this. And this is one of the problems as well. We narrow things unnecessarily because there is no education around it. People don't get educated about sexuality and sex. They only get some disjointed, twisted messages about it. And very often they have to figure it out on their own. I have a story, you wouldn't believe me, but 2 medical students,
yes,
admittingly from a conservative background, were not successful in their sexual act because they were not using the right body parts.
Wow. Medical students. Were the dentists?
Well, they were studying to be GPs, but because nobody actually explained to them how to do it, they were using wrong body parts to do it.
I'm scared to think where their thumb went.
Well, exactly. And this is not a unique story. There are also other stories where, for example, a young couple, again, from a conservative background, comes to a sex therapist saying that based on what they read on the internet, their female partner has vaginismus. And vaginismus is basically when the muscles of the vagina, they contract without actual intent, preventing the penetration, right? That's vaginismus. So they read on the internet that that's what's happening, sending the female partner to the sex therapist to kind of fix her. Guess what? There is no vaginismus in play. She simply never had sex.
Wow. I thought she wasn't a female.
No, she was a female, but she just, she was a virgin, and that's why it was painful for her. But they classified her as a medical case and sent her for treatment.
I think you made a lot of listeners feel better about their practices because a little bit more advanced, they worked out the state part.
Can I also add to this? That's actually another funny story. Recently, I had a couple that came to me and we had a whole day workshop talking about all different things, and it was quite successful to them. But at the end of the session, the female partner asked me, so are we doomed? And I just couldn't control myself. I said, you guys have intimacy at least a couple of times a month. You communicate well. You love each other. You are doing better than 90% of my couples. I have couples who haven't been intimate for over 5 years, sometimes even longer, and they're still going well. But the funny thing is nobody talks about it. That's why this poor couple that was generally probably not even only needed was reassurance from me. They were doing really well, but because nobody talks about it, they thought that they were doomed.
Do you think you will publish benchmarks at some point?
I think it's a really good idea. It's a really good idea to publish benchmarks. I mean, guys, if you listeners, if you have sex at least once a month, you're fine.
You are okay, but here brings another interesting point. On one of your workshops, there was a disparity between desires. One person desires more often or less often.
It's a very common. So
tell us a little bit more about it, what it means and what norm for one, for another is shocking facts they have to accept.
There is no norm. We're all different in that. But it is very common that life brings together two people with different sexuality levels. And we approach it the same way how we approach any opposite views. We say, hey, do you want to be close with each other? Yes. Is it possible for you to do it, let's say, as often as one of the partners wants? Maybe not realistically. But what can we do instead, for example, when there is a bit of a sexual desire bubbling up and then the other partner is not really feeling very sexual? We typically teach couples to get out of the practice of saying no. But
So what do I do if in front of me is a humping dog constantly on a go and you just came to this point when you want to hide?
We say, hey, you can always have a conversation about that. You can say, oh, darling, I see that you are quite horny. Can I do something or frisky? So is there something I can do if this is not necessarily like if I don't want to have full blown sex tonight? Very often we compromise. We say, oh, can I just masturbate close to you? Or can I don't know, just lie next to you? Can you just hold me? Sometimes even a cuddle is enough. If that feels not enough, and I do hear that feedback sometimes that I want the real deal, so to say, we say, okay, give me 48 hours. And within those 48 hours, because I know you're my partner and I love you, I'll come back to you. And I will initiate the frisky activity within 48 hours. But we do want to instill a culture where we respond to our partner, but not necessarily in the way they want, but we still respond to them in a compromise way.
So the main point is not avoid them,
Correct.
not ignore
Never.
them.
No.
And okay, that's interesting.
Because that only creates those two islands. And typically, as soon as we have the disconnect between the partners, they start thinking about each other the worst things. And that's only going to go downhill from there. So they need to keep the communication about it, even if they are not agreeing, but at least they're negotiating. We want partners to be constantly negotiating their sex lives.
The other interesting question, the same-sex couple. There is a notion of truth running around, and it's just this common concept that they have more interesting sex life. Because they understand each other's bodies more, they're representative of the same gender. Is it true? Can you support through your experience? Because I know you also engage in this counseling.
Yeah, I do work with same-sex couples. I also work with queer couples. And I must say, there are some nuances that are different to heterosexual couples. Like, for example, typically gay couples are a little bit more adventurous when it comes to sexuality. Very often they also have open sexual relationships. They may have a committed life relationship with one partner, but then they are open sexually because, they don't need to worry about contraception, but they have to worry about other things, for example. So yes, there are some nuances. Lesbian couples, in my experience, tend to have a very intense relationship typically. So there is a lot of emotion happening there, which at times can be a little bit too much as well. But I would say in general, most couples, especially if they communicate well, they have very similar quality of sex lives.
Okay, then can you take me through the infidelity aspect of it? Why infidelity? It seems to be society evolves and people open up this relationship, close relationship up, but it's never ever stops people from feeling pain when they experience infidelity. What is infidelity, first of all? Please define it, and then define why people feel so much pain around this issue, why so many lives ruined over this. And how would you handle this aspect? Is infidelity such a rare thing, or is it more frequent? We just don't know about it, and it's only painful when we discover it.
So the bottom line with infidelity is typically what hurts most. There are two things that hurt most. First of all, it's the betrayal. We had a contract. It often is an unwritten contract. In a case of marriage, it is typically a written contract. And you breached the contract. You hurt me because I trusted you. One of the reasons, and you as an accountant would know that, we enter into contractual relationships, we sign contracts because we want to know that I don't need to worry about it anymore, right?
Certified, yeah.
Yes. So it gives me the safety. As soon as there is a breach of contract, I'm no longer feeling safe. Mm-hmm. And you've hurt me knowing that this was against the contract. So there is this sense of betrayal there, which is very hard. And typically the person's safety, emotional safety, is at risk. That's the first reason why infidelity hurts so much. The second big part is there must be something wrong with me.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
There must be something wrong with me. Why was somebody more desirable or somebody was better than me? Why not me? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that sense of loss of confidence is very painful for people. Mm-hmm. So that's why infidelity hurts. But in my understanding, infidelity is all about the breach of contract.
Mm-hmm. There is breach of contract, but second aspect of a very interesting one, because it is undermining a partner. If you knew that partners have different energy and one partner would for sure would have to really supplement his menu with other infusions, let's call this way, how would you handle this aspect for the couple? How would you teach them to navigate these such treacherous waters?
Well, first of all, as always, it's open communication first. So yes, of course, it can be too far-fetched for one partner to fulfill the fantasies of the others. But if we are in a committed relationship, because we don't want to undermine the partner and we don't want them to feel unsafe, and when I say unsafe, I pretty much always mean that psychological safety, we do want to go to them first. So our partners have first point of call. They have that right because they're life partners. They raise our children with them. They share our financial responsibilities. So they have the right to be consulted first. And then if that consultation process is going nowhere, because let's say the other partner just like, this is too crazy what you want, they need to negotiate and compromise, whatever that might be. So the spectrum here varies. Some partners eventually realize that this is not actually that important to them compared to, let's say, losing their family. And then they may find ways, like, for example, watching a specific type of porn or maybe dressing up at home when nobody is around in the knowledge of their other partner that that's happening. Right? So some partners may compromise like that. Other partners may negotiate successfully to have a little bit of freedom in exploration as well.
Side dishes.
Yeah, for example. And often this is hard, but it's actually not as hard than many couples think. Like, for example, bisexual relationships is one of the most difficult topics in this, because typically you have one partner, typically that partner is of a specific gender. So automatically you need something else, regardless of who your partner is. And with bisexual relationships, it can be very hard, but funnily enough, often the other partner is more than willing to assist.
Yes, interesting. There are so many more questions I want to ask you. However, we have to ask our listeners to give us some feedback and tell whether those kind of topics interest us or not. And let's turn saucy into resourcey.
Thank you, Nadia.
And that's a wrap. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Real Relationships podcast. For more reality-tested relationship information, visit our Facebook group, Real Relationships. Or if you have a question or a guest suggestion for me to interview next, email me at podcast@alyonaserpentine.com.au. Stay tuned and stay real.